Okay, so at this point in time, we've opened up the anterior end of our earthworm. So that portion towards the head, what I did is I took the scissors and I just kind of sliced him right up the middle and then peeled his skin backwards. Our earthworm is special for a lot of reasons. The number one reason being that it's segmented, right? If you look at his body itself, you can see those individual ridges, those repeating body units that continue down the whole length of his body. Another reason our earthworms, and specifically our annelid worms, are going to be special is because they have a coelom, which we talked about like a way long while back when we initially talked about body plans. But a coelom is basically an empty body cavity. So when we slice open our earthworm, what we see is a conglomeration of organs surrounded by basically like nothingness, which is kind of cool. So a couple things here that I want to point out before we begin talking about the digestive system is more about the external anatomy of our earthworm itself. So our earthworm is segmented, and if we look really closely right over here, we see this guy. It kind of looks like a layer of mucus or like wet tissue. But this guy here, the saran wrap, that's a thing. It's like kind of like a saran wrap coating, but basically this is called the cuticle of our earthworm. And its job is basically to protect the body of the earthworm from the soil that it travels through. It kind of acts like a cuticle layer, like on a plant. It keeps moisture in, keeps dirt out. And as we made our initial cut through our worm, we see these bands. It's kind of easier to see up here, but there's a band right here. They're like these little fine threads that connect one side of our earthworm to the other. Here's one, here's one. I sliced through all of those in order to peel the skin apart, but those are called septa, and its job is basically to form the segments of our segmented worm. It keeps the earthworm nice and stuck together. And you'll find that when we slice through them, the skin kind of peels apart a little bit more. So here we slice through a couple here, and now we can peel back this segment of earthworm. So we're going to start by looking at our digestive system of our earthworm, because that's pretty much all earthworms do is eat. The eating process is going to start here at the anterior end of our earthworm, right here at the mouth, which is right about here. So food is going to come into the earthworm, and it's going to enter a tube that basically runs down the top of the earthworm to about here. And this tube is your pharynx. And basically what your pharynx does is act as a shovel that pulls food into the earthworm's digestive system. So it takes that soil from the mouth and then pushes it down the rest of its body. The food is then going to hit this piece right here, which I've accidentally sliced in half. But it's this squishy part right here, and it's like really squishy. It's soft, it can expand a lot, and this is the crop. The crop is basically a storage bin for your earthworm's soil. So food travels from the mouth to the pharynx, to this squishy digestive tract piece called the crop, which is going to store it for later. After it's been stored for a little bit, your soil is going to travel to this piece right here, which is right underneath the crop, but it's very different in texture compared to the crop. Crop is squishy, it can expand a lot. In fact, we can see some undigested soil inside of it. It's nice and squishy, real bendy, real flexible. This piece here is really hard. It's a firm muscle, and this is the gizzard. The gizzard's job is basically to smush all that soil that has traveled from the mouth to the esophagus to the crop and basically like push out any nutrients. It grinds down the food and begins the digestive process. So it's got to be a big old muscle because it's got to dissolve a bunch of stuff. Birds have a gizzard too. Inside their gizzards they have rocks, and it like smushes up their food before they can digest it. Kind of a cool tidbit for you. Once the food has been properly ground up, so at this point it's gone from the mouth down the pharynx to the crop, mashed up inside the gizzard, and then it's going to hit the digestive tract. This is the intestine. It's this long tube that runs all the way down our earthworm, all the way to its butt. It's a crazy long digestive tract, which is kind of darn cool here for us. But those are going to be our big important pieces for the digestive system of our earthworm. Another important system that we want to think about here for our earthworm is its circulatory system. Our earthworm a typical earthworm has 5 what we're going to call aortic arches, which act like a human heart. But really, they're like these little tubes that kind of join together to form kind of like arches. They look like this. And there's like multiple sets of them. And they act like a heart, and they like pump blood through your earthworm. We can see a couple of them here. They're these little dark brown bits that are popping up out of our earthworm. Here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So our earthworm here has 5. Some earthworms only have 4, some have 3. No earthworm is perfect, but ours is. So you should have five, should have 5 aortic arches inside your earthworm. Bum, bum. Additionally, in terms of the circulatory system, as we move down, we can actually see the dorsal, whoa, which one is this? I'm looking at the top. Yes, this is the dorsal blood vessel. It runs along his back. It's this dark line that sits on top of the intestine. So your intestine is this big tube right here. This dark line running across the top of it is actually a blood vessel that actually pumps blood down the entire length of your earthworm's body. Okay, so we've done digestive system, we've done circulatory system. Now we're gonna hit the reproductive system. So your earthworm here, this particular sample, is neither male nor female. In fact, earthworms are hermaphrodites, meaning that they have both male and female reproductive organs. They have the ability to produce both sperm and eggs. Man, I just totally severed that digestive tract. Oh well, that's okay. So if we move up here towards the top part of our earthworm, we'll see 2 important features. We're gonna see first our seminal vesicles, which are these big, lumpy, yellowish stuff right here, and then also right here. They've been pinned through on the side. But your seminal vesicles' job is basically to produce sperm, and these are gigantic. It's like all an earthworm does, is produce sperm, digest soil. Produce sperm, digest soil. We're also gonna see some smaller yellowish blobs here. You can see 3 of them right here, 1, 2, 3. These are your seminal receptacles. And these guys' job is to actually collect sperm when your earthworms mate and then store it until they're ready to fertilize an egg. When your earthworm is ready to fertilize an egg, basically what it does is out of its clitellum, that scarf-like structure, it's gonna produce like this mucus. And in that mucus, it's gonna put a fertilized egg. And then that egg is essentially gonna like hatch into an earthworm in like 2 to 3 weeks, which is pretty cool. So when earthworms mate, they basically exchange sperm. And then when they're ready, they produce a fertilized egg that grows into a new earthworm, which is kind of a cool thing here. So this guy here is not necessarily male or female. It has both male and female reproductive parts. Last piece here for us that I think is interesting to look at. So far we've looked at the digestive tract, we've looked at the circulatory system, we've looked at the reproduction system. Let's look very quickly here at our nervous system. Right, when we first started talking about animals, we said like, the more advanced their nervous system, the more advanced they are, right? We talked about sponges, and we were like, sponges are not advanced at all. They're the simplest of all invertebrates. They like basically have no nervous system. And we talked about roundworms and flatworms and said that they were more advanced, but still not like super, super advanced. Here, as we move into our earthworms, we're actually gonna see some like pretty well-developed nervous systems. So underneath the intestines, so this is like along the belly of the worm. This is the part that's roaming on the ground. You see this white thread right here? This white thread that sits under the intestine is actually the worm's spinal column, spinal cord. And basically what it does is it connects the neurons found in each of these different segments to a tiny, tiny brain that's up here. I haven't been able to find the brain yet. Mostly because these scalpels are bad. I also think I might have accidentally pinned through it. So it might be on that part. But moral of the story here is that earthworms have real tiny, tiny brains. You can't even find it. Much smaller brain than yours. Okay, so here we have the nerve cord, and we should be able to also see, actually no, I think that's about all we're gonna be able to see. Okay, so there we've got the nerve cord running along the belly of the earthworm, taking signals from all these different segments of the worm and sending them up to the brain. So we've got the digestive tract, circulatory system, reproduction, nervous system. Earthworms are pretty cool, pretty simple. Mostly just like a big intestine. And that's about gonna wrap us up here today. At this point in time, make sure you fill out that green sheet of paper that has a picture of an earthworm on it and some boxes. Skip those post-op questions at the bottom. I'm gonna have you do them on Google Classroom on a separate document. And then also ignore that box at the bottom that says attach your lab procedure and your color diagram. Hard to turn those into me electronically. So for right now, just fill out the questions on that green sheet. And then if you did it on a hard copy, take a picture and upload it to Google Classroom for me. But that's all I got here. Catch you later.